Hey guys, welcome back to another app tutorial. This time we're going to be working on making another game in the app lab that's slightly more complex than the bug finder game that we made last time. So again, you're going to start by going to create in the top right corner of code.org and selecting the app lab to open a new app lab. Now the app that we're going to make today is a little bit more complex in terms of design, so we need to make multiple screens. So if we go to the design tab and rename this first screen, I'm just going to call it home screen. Then we need to click on screen and make another screen, which we'll call the game screen. And then we're going to create a third screen, which we'll call score screen. Okay, so let's set up the home screen first. So if you go to your drop-down menu and click on the home screen, this is the one that we're going to design first. So I'm going to drag in a label. And the game that we're going to create today is kind of like a whack-a-mole game, but instead of a mole, we're going to use an emoji as the target. So we're going to rename our label, title label, and the text in that can be Whack-e-moji or something along those lines. I'll make the label a little bit larger by dragging the corner out. And I'm going to change the text size to 20. It doesn't quite fit, so I need to drag out the label a little bit further. There we go. And I'll drag that to the top. And then I'm going to add a start button. So I'm going to drag the button in. I'm going to rename it start button. And the text is going to say start. The next thing I'm going to do is set up the game screen. So let's go to the game screen now. So click the drop down box at the top, select game screen. And the first thing we need to do is drag in an image. So I'm going to drag in one image and I'm going to choose from the icons this little tile, the same tile that we used last time. You can use the sharp square if you want, but I like the rounded corner one. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to change the color of it so that it's like a light bluey color. Yep, that looks good. And I'm going to rename this one S1 for square one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this 8 more times. So duplicate, and I'm going to arrange it almost like a noughts and crosses grid. And as I do, I'm going to rename each one S1, then S2, and so on. So I duplicate again, line it up so the spaces are pretty much even. Call this one S3. The next one can go there. I'm going to call it S4. S5. S6. S7. Two more. S8. And S9. Alright, now that we've got our game board set up, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to choose the emoji, which is going to be the character in our game that we're trying to whack. Now we could drag in an image and select an emoji from there, but what I'm going to do is drag in a label instead. I'm going to rename the label emoji, and then in the text part, if I press Windows and the full stop, I get the emoji keyboard and I can select one of the emojis. In this case, I'm just going to choose the emoji with sunglasses. I'll close this and then I'm going to make the text size relatively large, maybe 26, probably more. That looks okay. Let's just see if that fits into our squares. And it seems to fit into the squares pretty well. Okay, the last thing we need to do for this screen at least is add 2 more labels. I'm going to drag one in and just call it score title, and the text can say score. And I'm going to drag another label underneath it, which will call score label, and the text at the moment can be nothing. This will be the way we track our score once we program our game. The last thing we need to do is set up our final screen, which is the score screen. So we'll click the drop down again, go to the score screen, and on our score screen we're just going to have two labels, one called final score, title, and it can just say final score, and then another label underneath it called final score, and the text for that one can be just blank for now. I'm going to drag it out so it's a little bit larger and then center it. Alright, now we're ready to code our game. So let's go back to our home screen and then go to the code tab. Okay, now that we've got all the design components of our app that we need, we can start to program our game and work out how it's going to function. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create 3 functions, which is not something that we've done before, so this is a new tool. So if you go to the functions tab and drag in the function my function, we're going to create 3 of these. Now the first one we're going to call play game, and this is going to be a function that tells us what is happening while the game's being played. We're going to create a second function called move emoji. This will be a function that makes our emoji move around and make it hard for us to click. And the third function we're going to call end game. And this is what's going to happen when the game is over. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to program this move emoji function. So we need to drag in some variables. So if you go to the variable tab and drag in 2 variables, call one x and one y. And for the value of x and y are both going to be random numbers between 0 and 2. So if we drag from the math tab random number in from 0 to 2, and then 0 to 2 for the y component. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to use a set position to, based on whatever numbers generated randomly for x and y, change the position of our emoji. So we drag in the set position and we're moving the emoji. And in this case, our tiles that we drag in are about 70 pixels across. And depending on where they start, we need to add a number. So we're going to drag in the plus operator for the x and y position. And you're going to need to go back to the game screen and put the mouse over the corner of your tile. So I can see that my tile is at about x 58 and y 67. So in this plus section for the x, I'm going to type 58 plus x times 70 because the tiles are about 70 pixels across. And then in the other one, I'm going to type whatever the y component is. So in this case, it's about 68. So I'm going to type 68 plus y times 70. And we can adjust this later if it's not quite right. So that's the function to move our emoji. So it generates a random number for x, a random number for y. And then based on what number it generates, it'll move the emoji to one of these 9 spots. Alright, the next function we're going to create is for our end game. Now, at the end of the game, we want to see what score we got, and we want to go to our end game screen. So before we can actually have a score, we need to create a variable for our score. So go to the variable tab, and we're going to drag another variable all the way to the top that I'm going to call score, and it can just be equal to 0 at the start of the game. And when the game's over, we want to set the screen. So go to our UI controls and find the set screen block to the score screen because that's the end of the game. And then we want to set the text of our final score to score. And you'll have to go into show text, delete those 2 quotation marks and type in score. then you can go back to the blocks. The last function we need to set up is the play game function, and it's going to be easier to set this up in the text. So if you click show text, and then underneath the play game function, type set interval, open brackets, move emoji, comma 1000, and then put a semicolon at the end of that line. And what this does is it sets an interval so that every 1 second the move emoji function will go. So every 1 second the emoji is going to move to a random square on our game screen. If we wanted to make the game harder, you could make this number smaller, so you could make it 500 for example, and then the emoji would move every half a second, or you could make it easier by making the number larger. The other thing we need to do is set a timeout. So if we type set timeout, open bracket, end game, comma, and then this is how long our game's going to go for. So I'm going to make my game go for 15 seconds, and then I want the game to end. So you've got 15 seconds to get as many points as you can, and then the game's over. Then we can go back to the blocks. Alright, so now our game has all of the functions that it needs to work. So all we need to now do is create a few on events and create a way for the game to check if we've accidentally clicked the tile as opposed to the emoji, and we're done. So if we go to our UI control screen, drag out our first on event, the first one we're going to do is for starting the game. So when the start button is clicked, we want to set the score to 0, because every new game we want our score to start at 0. So we go to this variable tab and then x equals something, and you're going to type in score equals 0. We want to change the screen to the game screen, so go to UI controls and select set screen to game screen, and then we want our play game function to run. So if we go to show text, return a line underneath set screen to game screen, and then type play game, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. So when the start button's clicked, set the score to 0, change to the game screen, and then play the game. Let's go back to the blocks. We need to set another on event for when we click the emoji to give us a score. So we're going to set on event that the emoji is clicked. We want to add, let's say, 100 points to our score. So we're going to go score equals plus 100. And then we want to change the text of our score label to reflect that. So we're going to go to set text of our score label to score, and we need to go into the show text, delete this and the quotation marks, and then type score. And the last thing we need to do is create an event that checks to see if we click the background, because we want to take points away if we accidentally click the background instead of the emoji. So to do this, we need to create a loop. So we need to go to the control and drag out this for block, and we're going to go for variable I equals 1 to I equals less than 10. Then we need to go on event and drag that into our loop, and on the event that one of our squares is clicked, so we're going to need to type in, drag in a plus, and in quotation marks put S plus I is clicked. We want to reduce the score by 100, so go to the variables, drag out the x equals something, and go score equals minus 100, and then we want to set the text of our score label to reflect that. So set text of score label, not score title, score label to score, and you just need to go in again and delete. the quotation marks. So we should have everything now to test our game, so let's do that. So if I hit run, start, and my emoji seems to be moving okay. I might need to tweak those numbers a little bit. And the score seems to be stuck at 100 or minus 100. So two things we need to change. One, we need to change the set position of our emoji, and I need to change the score variables here slightly because I've used the wrong syntax. So I'm just going to go first of all to my set position, and it looked like when I was playing the game that my emoji was a little bit over to the right hand side of each of the tiles, which means I just need to reduce the X number a little bit, this 58. So I might change it to say 50, and my Y number probably can be increased a little bit. So if I change this to 50 and my Y to say 70, that should improve that a little bit. Now I just need to go back into the text, and here where I've said score equals plus 100 and score equals minus 100, to add 100 and minus 100, I need to go plus equals, not equals plus. So it's just a little mistake I've made there, and that should solve all of our problems. I'll go back to the blocks. I'm going to reset the game and run and start. And now you can see that the emojis are much more centered on each of the blocks, and the score is counting up, and it should count down if I accidentally click the background. And you can see it even goes negative if I'm bad enough. And then at the end, I should get a final score. Perfect. All right, I've got a few challenges for you now. So I'd like you to see, first of all, if you could change the emoji to something else to make the game a little bit more interesting. The second thing is to see if you can make the emoji move a little bit faster around the game while you're playing it. And the third thing is, I want you to see if you can change the scoring so that the scoring counts up by thousands instead of hundreds. Once you've done that, click the share button at the top and post the link in Google Classroom so that I can check out your app. And if you want to install it on your phone, click send to phone and scan the QR code. And that's it for this tutorial.